Welcome back to Beneath the Surface, the dark side of crime. Tonight, we're uncovering the chilling secrets behind one of the most talked-about hostels in the city, Stella Hostel, a place many travelers call home for a night. But what if this seemingly innocent spot harbors a dark truth beneath its walls? Guests have reported eerie sightings, strange disappearances, and whispers that can't be explained. Could this hostel be hiding a deadly secret? Stay tuned, because in this video, we dive deep into the darkness that lurks within Stella Hostel, and you'll want to stick around until the end to find out the shocking truth. I arrived at Stella Hostel late one evening after a long bus ride from the city's outskirts. My legs were sore from hours of travel, and all I wanted was a place to drop my bag and rest for the night. I hadn't booked in advance, but when I checked the website, the reviews seemed decent enough. Cheap, central, and close to everything I wanted to see. It was perfect, or so I thought. The lobby was small and unremarkable. The desk clerk, a guy in his late 20s, barely looked up as he handed me the room key. "Room 7, he said, his tone flat. "Upstairs." I thanked him and lugged my bag up the creaky stairs. The hallway smelled a bit musty, the kind of old building smell you'd expect, but it wasn't overwhelming. What struck me as odd, though, was the silence. Not a sound from the other rooms. No doors opening or closing, no voices, not even the sound of footsteps. It felt oddly empty. As I approached my room, I saw that the door to room 7 was slightly ajar. It shouldn't have been, but I shrugged it off, pushed the door open, and stepped inside. The room itself wasn't bad, small but clean, with a single bed covered in a worn but fresh-looking sheet. A small window let in the dim glow of the streetlights outside, and the walls were painted a dull shade of yellow. But as I dropped my bag on the bed and stretched my sore muscles, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. I went to the bathroom to freshen up, and when I returned, I heard it, the faintest of whispers, coming from outside the door. I froze, not sure if I had imagined it. Then it came again. Tom. My blood ran cold. My name. There was no way anyone could have known it. I stood completely still, listening, but all I heard after that was silence. I opened the door, half expecting to find someone standing there. Nothing. The hallway was empty, but the air felt thick, like something was pressing in on me. I closed the door and locked it, trying to ignore the cold sweat on my palms. Maybe it was just exhaustion messing with my head, or maybe it was something else entirely. The next morning, I met a few other guests during breakfast. They were all friendly, people from different parts of the world, talking about their travels and experiences. But there was something about the vibe at Stella Hostel that I couldn't shake. It felt like everyone was avoiding the subject of the place's atmosphere. Even though everyone was speaking in hushed tones, there was an undeniable sense of unease. I met Sarah, a woman in her mid-20s who seemed like she'd been staying at Stella for a while. She had a nervous energy about her, constantly glancing over her shoulder. We started talking over coffee, and I found myself asking her if she'd noticed anything strange. Her eyes widened and she leaned closer as if making sure no one else could hear. "Oh, you've heard it too," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Heard what?" I asked, genuinely confused. "The whispers, the footsteps, the shadows. It's not just in your head, you know." Sarah's voice trembled as she spoke, and it was clear she wasn't just making this up for dramatic effect. I felt my stomach drop. "You hear them too? In the hallways?" Sarah nodded, and I could see the fear in her eyes. "It's not just that. People disappear here. Not often, but enough. You wouldn't believe how many people have checked in, and then never left." She paused, glancing around nervously before continuing. "It starts with the whispers, then the shadows in your room. And before you know it, you start seeing things that shouldn't be there, like faces in the windows, or figures standing in the corner of the room when you turn your back." I tried to laugh it off. "Sounds like ghost stories, right?" Sarah shook her head. "It's not just stories, Tom. It's real. I've seen it, felt it. And trust me, you don't want to stay here long enough to find out." That night, I heard the whispers again. Only this time, it wasn't soft. It was loud enough for me to make out. "Get out." I froze. The voice was right outside my door, a deep, hoarse whisper that made my blood run cold. I jumped out of bed and checked the hallway. Empty. But when I went back into my room, I couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was watching me. As the days went on, I couldn't ignore the strange occurrences anymore. At breakfast, I overheard bits and pieces of conversations between other guests. They were talking in hushed tones, but I caught enough to realize that Sarah wasn't the only one who felt uneasy. There were rumors about Stella Hostel, stories that had been passed around but never confirmed. Some guests claimed to have heard voices in their rooms, or to have seen strange figures in the hallway late at night. Others whispered about disappearances that the hostel's management had swept under the rug. I decided to do a little digging. Over the course of the next few days, I asked around. A man named Robert, an older guest staying in room 9, seemed to know more than he was letting on. He was reluctant to talk about it, but after a few drinks in the common area, he opened up. "I've been coming here for years," Robert said, his voice quiet. "But it wasn't always like this. Back in the 90s, there was a fire. A big one. The kind that makes the news." I leaned forward, eager to hear more. It was bad. Really bad. They say it was an accident, that faulty wiring was to blame. But there were rumors. Some say the fire was set on purpose. Others say it was a cover-up. "Cover-up? Cover-up what?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. Robert glanced around nervously before leaning in closer. "People disappeared that night. Guests. No one really talked about it, but I know what I saw. The fire wasn't just a random accident. It was meant to erase something. Someone." My heart raced. This was more than I had bargained for. What had happened here, and who was involved? A few days after my conversation with Robert, I found myself talking to a new guest, Lucas. He had checked in just the day before, and he was eager to explore the city. We chatted in the common area, and I made a mental note of his room number, room 14. But the next morning, Lucas was gone. His things, his backpack, clothes, even his shoes, were still in his room, but he wasn't anywhere to be found. I went to the front desk, asking if anyone had seen him. The receptionist barely glanced up. "He probably checked out early," he said dismissively. "It happens all the time." I knew better than to take his word for it. Something was off, and I wasn't about to let it go. I spent the day asking around, trying to find out more. What I uncovered was chilling. Guests who had checked in with Lucas had heard strange noises coming from his room. Footsteps, scraping sounds. They all said the same thing. No one had seen him leave. He had just vanished. Later that night, I decided to take a trip to the basement, something I'd been avoiding. Everyone who worked at the hostel avoided it, and most guests never even talked about it. But I needed to know. I had to understand what was going on here. The basement was musty, cold, and filled with old furniture and boxes. But there, hidden behind a stack of dusty old furniture, was a door. A small, rusted door. My heart pounded in my chest as I crept toward it. I found an old key behind the desk. It turned easily in the lock. When I stepped inside, the sight that greeted me made my stomach lurch. The room was covered in newspaper clippings, stories of disappearances, strange deaths, and a string of unsolved mysteries tied to the hostel. And there, among the clippings, was a photograph of a man I recognized. The owner of the hostel. The same man I had seen earlier standing at the door. But here's the thing. He wasn't just any owner. He was part of the darker story of Stella Hostel. He had been involved in far more than anyone could imagine. The more I uncovered, the more I realized that Stella Hostel was nothing more than a cover for something far more sinister. The fire, the disappearances, the strange occurrences, they were all part of a dark operation running behind the scenes. I couldn't stay any longer. I had to leave. But the whispers wouldn't stop. They were louder than ever. As I packed my bag, I turned around to find Sarah standing in the doorway, her face pale as a ghost. "You can't leave," she said, her voice low and trembling. "It knows you're here now. You're not safe." I ran. There was no other choice. I had to get out before whatever was lurking in the hostel got to me. But as I walked out of the building, I could feel eyes on me. The whispers followed me, filling my head with chaos and fear. The truth behind Stella Hostel would remain buried for some, but not for me. I had uncovered it, and it would haunt me forever. And as I left that place behind, I knew the darkness would continue to claim new victims. Months had passed since I left Stella Hostel. I thought the nightmares were behind me. I had returned to my normal life, far away from that sinister place. But the memories, they never truly faded. At first, it was the odd feeling that someone was always watching me. I'd look over my shoulder, convinced that I saw someone following me. Every night I'd wake up in a cold sweat, the whispers ringing in my ears. But that wasn't enough to keep me from moving on. Life went on, but the feeling of dread stayed like an unwelcome guest. One morning, as I was sipping my coffee, something strange happened. A letter arrived. It wasn't a regular envelope. There was no return address, just a plain white envelope with neat handwriting on the front. "Tom," it said. I ripped it open with trembling hands. Inside, there was a single piece of paper. It was simple, but the message it contained was enough to send chills down my spine. "They know you're coming back." The letter was unsigned. There was no hint of who sent it. But as I stared at the words, a wave of nausea hit me. I knew exactly what it meant. Stella Hostel was calling me back. It wasn't done with me yet. The darkness I thought I had escaped had followed me, and now it was about to drag me back into its grip. I immediately tried to convince myself that I was overreacting. But deep down, I knew that this wasn't just some coincidence. Something, or someone, was out there, pulling the strings. I had no choice but to face the truth. The past wasn't finished with me, and neither was Stella Hostel. The decision was inevitable. I had to go back. I had to face whatever was waiting for me. I didn't know what I was walking into, but I knew that leaving it unresolved would never allow me to move on. I arrived at Stella Hostel a week later, my heart pounding in my chest. The familiar, oppressive atmosphere hit me the moment I stepped through the front door. The lobby was unchanged, the air still thick with that musty old building smell. It was as if time hadn't passed at all, like I had never left. But something was different. The atmosphere felt even more stifling, as if the building was holding its breath, waiting for something. Or someone. I approached the front desk, and there he was, the receptionist who had given me my room key the first time. His expression was distant, almost mechanical, like he had no emotions at all. "You again," he said flatly, barely acknowledging me. "Room 7. I nodded, unable to find the right words. It felt like I had never left, but the fear was there, suffocating me. He handed me the key without another word. I made my way up to room 7, and the further I went, the heavier the silence grew. Each step seemed to echo louder, and I felt like the walls were closing in on me. The door to room 7 was just as I remembered it, slightly ajar, as if waiting for me to walk in. When I opened the door, a chill ran down my spine. It was the same room, same faded yellow walls, same cracked window, same worn sheets on the bed. Yet something felt off. There was a presence in the room, something that made my skin crawl. I hesitated before stepping inside, the air thick with unease. The door creaked shut behind me, and I knew I was trapped. That's when I saw it. A shadow in the corner of the room. At first, I thought it was just my mind playing tricks, but when I looked again, it was unmistakable. The shadow wasn't from the furniture, nor was it a trick of the light. It was moving. My heart skipped a beat. The shadow was there, watching me. I could feel its eyes on me, though I couldn't see them. The room grew colder, and the whispers started. So faint at first, barely audible, but then growing louder until they were all I could hear. "Leave," they hissed. I wasn't sure if I could. I wasn't sure if I wanted to. The whispers grew more desperate, as though the room itself was begging me to escape. I couldn't stay in room 7 any longer. I bolted out, my breathing ragged, and ran down the hall toward the stairs. But something strange happened on my way out. A door, hidden behind an old bookshelf, creaked open before I could pass it. It was a door I had never seen before. There was no sign, no label, just a dark, narrow space behind it. Against my better judgment, I stepped inside. The air in the room was colder than the rest of the hostel, and the walls were damp, almost as if the place had been sealed off for years. In the dim light, I noticed something chilling. Old photos lined the walls. The same man I had seen earlier, the owner, was in almost every one of them. But these photos weren't just random snapshots. They were part of a pattern, each one showing him standing in the same spot, in the same position. I slowly approached the center of the room, where a small table stood, covered in dust. It was a scrapbook, yellowed with age, its pages sticking together. As I flipped it open, my eyes widened in horror. The book was filled with photos of previous guests who had vanished. But what terrified me the most was what I found in the final pages. The owner, standing with a man I knew all too well. Robert, the guest who had warned me about the fire years ago. Robert had been here before, and he had known the truth. And now, it seemed that he had become part of the twisted cycle that kept the hostel alive, feeding off fear and darkness. I had found the answers, but they only led to more questions. I couldn't just walk away anymore. I needed to stop whatever was happening in this place. But I knew that I wasn't the first person to try. The previous guests, the ones who vanished, they were all part of a pattern, a cycle that had been happening for decades. As I stood in the hidden room, I heard footsteps behind me. Slowly, I turned around. The man from the photos, the owner of the hostel, was standing in the doorway, his face unreadable. His eyes were empty, hollow. "You shouldn't have come back," he said, his voice a low rasp. I didn't answer. Instead, I stood tall, knowing that this was the moment I either ended this or became another name in the scrapbook. "You won't stop it," he whispered, stepping closer. "This place, it never lets go." I felt the air shift, growing colder. The walls seemed to close in on me, but this time, I wasn't afraid. I had to do something. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the key that had been passed down through generations, the key to the basement where everything had started. With trembling hands, I shoved it into the lock of the hidden room, and a blinding light filled the room. I never saw the owner again after that moment. The light swallowed everything, and when it faded, I was standing outside the hostel, gasping for air. The hostel behind me was empty, quiet, almost like it had never existed. But I knew better. I knew that Stella Hostel wasn't gone. It wasn't finished. It was just waiting for the next victim. The cycle would continue, as it always had. And I knew one thing for sure. I would never be free of its dark grasp. And there you have it. The dark truth behind Stella Hostel, secrets that have been hidden for years, finally uncovered. But as we know, some stories never truly end. The hostel still stands, and for those brave enough to stay, the whispers will continue. Remember, stay tuned for more investigations into the world's most chilling crime stories, right here on Beneath the Surface, the dark side of crime. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to uncover more of the hidden truths lurking in the shadows.